In the darkness outside the window, a stunned, dazed John Woodford saw her lift an illumined face towards the man's. "I'm proud to be your wife at last, dear, no matter what anyone may say about us," he heard. Woodford drew slowly back from the window. He paused in the darkness under the trees, his mind shaken, torn. So this was his homecoming from the tomb? This was the joy he had anticipated in Helen when he returned? It couldn't be the truth. His ears had deceived him. Helen could not be the wife of Curtis Dawes, yet part of his mind told him remorselessly that it was true. He had always sensed that Helen's feelings for him was not as strong as his for her, but that she had loved Dawes he had never dreamed. Yet now he remembered Dawes's frequent visits, the odd silences between him and Helen. He remembered 1,000 trifles that spoke of the love which these two had cherished for each other. What was he, John Woodford, to do? Walk in upon them and tell them that they had been premature in counting him dead? That he had come back to claim his position in life and his wife again? He couldn't do it. If Helen during those years had wavered in the least in her loyalty to him, he would have less compunction. But in the face of those years of silent, uncomplaining life with him, he couldn't now reappear to her and blast her newfound happiness and blacken her name. Woodford laughed a little, bitterly. He was then to be an Enoch Arden from the tomb? A strange role, surely, yet it was the only one open to him. What was he to do? He couldn't let Helen know that he was alive, couldn't return to the home that had been his. Yet he must go somewhere. With a sudden leap of the heart, he thought of Jack, his son. He could at least go to Jack, let his son know that he was living. Jack at least would be overjoyed to see him, and would keep the fact of his return secret from his mother. John Woodford, with that thought, rekindling a little his numbed feelings, started back through the trees toward the street, where he had approached the house but minutes before with eager steps. He stole away now like a thief, fearful of being observed. He reached the street and started across the blocks towards the cottage of his son. Few were abroad, for the cold seemed increasing, and it was well past midnight. Woodford mechanically rubbed his stiffened hands as he hurried along. He came to his son's neat little white cottage, and felt relief as he saw lights from its lower windows also. He had feared that no one would be up. He crossed the frozen lawn to the lighted windows, intent on seeing if Jack were there and if he were alone. He peered in, as he had done at his own home. Jack was sitting at a little desk, and his young wife was perched on the arm of his chair, and was listening as he explained something to her from a sheet of writing on the desk. John Woodford, pressing his face against the cold window pane, could hear Jack's words. "You see, Dorothy, we can make it just by adding our savings to Dad's insurance money," Jack was saying. "Oh, Jack," cried Dorothy happily, "and it's what you've wanted so long, a little business of your own." Jack nodded. "It won't be very big to start with, but I'll make it grow all right. This is the chance I've been hoping for, and I'm sure going to make the most of it." "Of course," he said, his face sobering a little. "It's too bad about Dad going like that, but seeing that he did die, the insurance money solves our problems of getting started." John Woodford drew slowly back from the window. He felt more dazed and bewildered than ever. He had forgotten the insurance he had carried, which he had intended to give Jack his start. But of course, he saw now, it had been paid over when he was believed dead. He was not dead, but living. Yet if he let Jack know that, it meant the end of his son's long-desired opportunity. Jack would have to return the insurance money to the company, wrecking his dreamed-of chance. How could he let him know then? He, John Woodford, had already decided that he must remain dead to his wife, and therefore to the world. He might as well remain so to his son also. It was for the best. John Woodford melted away from the cottage into the darkness. When he reached the street, he stood in indecision. A freezing wind had begun to blow, and he felt very cold without an overcoat. Mechanically, he turned his coat collar closer to his neck. He tried to think what he must do. Neither Helen nor Jack must know that he was living, and that meant that no one in the city must know. He must get out of town to some other place, take up life under some other name. But he would need help, money to do that. Where was he to get them? Barred as he was from calling on his wife or son, to whom could he turn for help without letting his return become generally known? Howard Norse. The name came at once to Woodford's lips. Norse had been his employer, head of the firm where Woodford had held a position for many years. Woodford had been one of his oldest employees. Howard Norse would help him to get a position somewhere else, and would keep his reappearance secret. He knew where Norse's residence was, several miles out in the country, but he couldn't walk that far, and he had no taxi or trolley fare. He would have to telephone Norse. Woodford walked back towards the city's central station, head bent against the piercing cold wind. He succeeded in finding an all-night lunchroom, whose proprietor allowed him to use the telephone. With cold, stiffened fingers, he dialed Norse's number. Howard Norse's sleepy voice soon came over the wire. "Mr. Norse, this is Woodford, John Woodford," he said quickly. There was an incredulous exclamation from Howard Norse. "You're crazy. John Woodford's been dead and buried for a couple weeks." "No, I tell you, it's John Woodford," insisted Woodford. "I'm not dead at all. I'm as living as you are. If you'll come into town for me, you'll see for yourself." "I'm not likely to drive into town at 2 a.m. to look at a maniac," Norse replied acidly. "Whatever your game is, you're wasting your time on me." "But you've got to help me," Woodford cried. "I've got to have money, a chance to get out of the city without anyone knowing. I gave your firm my services for years, and now you've got to give me help." "Listen to me, whoever you are," snapped Norse over the wire. "I was bothered long enough with John Woodford when he was living. He was so inefficient we'd have kicked him out long ago if we hadn't been sorry for him. But now that he's dead, you needn't think you can bother me in his name. Good night." The receiver clicked in Woodford's unbelieving ear. But there must be someone upon whom he could call for help, someone he could convince that John Woodford was still living, someone who would be glad to think that he might be living. What about Willis Gran? Gran had been his closest friend next to Curtis Dawes. He had lent money more than once to Woodford in the past, and certainly should be willing to do so now. Hastily, Woodford called Gran's number. This time he was more careful in his approach when he heard the other's voice. "Willis, I've got something to tell you that may sound incredible, but you've got to believe. Do you hear?" he said. "Who is this, and what in the world are you talking about?" demanded Gran's startled voice. "Willis, this is John Woodford. Do you hear? John Woodford. Everyone thinks I'm dead, but I'm not, and I've got to see you." "What?" cried the other's voice over the telephone. "Why, you must be drunk. I saw Woodford lying in his coffin myself, so I know he's dead." "I tell you, it's not so. I'm not dead," Woodford almost screamed. "I've got to get some money, though, to get away from here, and you must lend it to me. You always lent it to me before, and I need it now worse than ever. I've got to get away." "So that's it," said Willis Gran. "Because I used to help Woodford out, you think you can get money from me just by calling me up and pretending that you're he? Why, Woodford himself was the biggest pest in the world with his constant borrowings. I felt almost relieved when he died. And now you try to make me believe that he's come back from the dead to pester me again?" "But he never died. I'm John Woodford, really," Woodford protested vainly. "Sorry, old top," returned Gran's mocking voice. "Next time, pick a living person to impersonate, not a dead one." He hung up. John Woodford slowly replaced the receiver and made his way out to the street. The wind was blowing harder and now was bringing with it clouds of fine snow that stung against his face like sand. He shivered as he stumbled along the streets of dark shops, his body freezing as his mind was frozen. There was no one from whom he could get help, he saw. His paramount necessity was still to get out of the city, and to do that he must rely on himself.